Hey there, good morning. How many of you love writing treatment plans? You look forward to writing treatment plans. You think treatment plans are the best. It's your favorite part of providing play therapy services. I'm laughing because I know that many of you are not going. In fact, if I were to take a really unofficial guess, I would say 99.89% of you would say writing treatment plans is not your favorite part of providing play therapy services to children, adolescents, and even adults, families. So, what are some of the challenges of writing treatment plans? Like, this is part of what we have to do. It's required. What are some of the reasons that get in the way of being able to accomplish this task, not just to check the box that I've completed this dreaded task? What if there was a way to shift your thinking and think about treatment plans a different way that actually helped you realize treatment plans actually can be beneficial? I don't think any of us are really going to ever enjoy doing documentation. We don't get into play therapy or the mental health field to write progress notes and do documentation. However, I don't believe that documentation has to be the dreaded task and it has to be avoided, which then ends up leading to other problems. And I don't believe that writing treatment plans has to be complicated or take forever. One of the things I often hear from play therapists and even people in the mental health field is that they don't know how to write treatment plans. They take forever. Treatment plans are complicated and they don't know how to write them. So it's kind of cumbersome and overwhelming and challenging. The other thing I hear oftentimes from professionals in the mental health field is it's a waste of time, doesn't make any difference. Sometimes it's even avoided altogether, like people don't do treatment plans. I think that happens more often than we would care to admit that it happens. Having been in the mental health field for a while in supervisory roles, and working for other companies and talking to other professionals who are in these roles, I think it happens more than we care to admit. And so the question is, why would people who have really good ethical standards not write treatment plans? And I think it has everything to do with beliefs about treatment plans and viewing it as complicated or a waste of time. And to me, our thoughts really make a difference. Our beliefs about things, we know this in the mental health field, we know this in play therapy. Our beliefs influence behavior, and our attitude towards things influences our approach to the task. So, in this episode, I want to talk about 3 myths that I believe create barriers to writing meaningful, and that's the key word there, meaningful treatment plans that you actually view as useful to use in the change process for your clients. So, I'd love to know who's here today. Go ahead and post your name in the comments, post where you're from, what population you work with. What are your thoughts about treatment plans? How many of you dread treatment plans or think they're too complicated? How many of you are hoping to get some tips for writing treatment plans today? Go ahead and post that in the comments. I'd love to see who's here. Feel free to ask questions. I'm Kathy Spooner. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist supervisor with over 30 years in the mental health field, working with children, adolescents, and families. And I love using play therapy. That's my specialty area, using play therapy with children, adolescents, and families. So I go live every week at 7 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays to talk about all things play therapy and expressive arts. Feel free to join me. If you're watching the replay, feel free to join every Wednesday. I live stream into my Facebook group, Play and Expressive Arts Therapy Playground. That's that's a play therapy and expressive arts focused Facebook group for mental health professionals. So if you're interested and you're on Facebook, feel free to pop over there to my Facebook group. You do have to answer all the questions to get into the group. Otherwise, you won't get in. And I like to make sure to say that because it still happens all the time that people don't answer every question and then they don't get into the group. So just make sure you answer all those questions. I also live stream into LinkedIn and my YouTube channel and Instagram. So if you are watching on any of those platforms and you want to see any of my previous replays, probably the easiest place to find them is on my YouTube channel, Kathy Spooner Renewing Hearts Training, or in my Facebook group. I pin all of the replays in the featured section. So let's get started. Hey, Brianna, in graduate school, look forward to tips on how to write treatment plans. That's awesome. So, Brianna, are you here in the US? Are you planning on working with children and adolescents? This is a great time to learn how to write treatment plans too. I don't know. I'm curious, Brianna, if your program teaches you how to write treatment plans. It's been my experience, most people in the mental health field, especially working with children and adolescents, you don't get a lot of training in treatment planning. I think for me, the benefit I have is my undergraduate degree is teaching special education. So you have to write individualized education plans, IEPs. And so when I was in my undergraduate program, we had this whole semester breaking down and writing treatment plans over and over and over again. I feel like I'm fortunate in that way. And I don't find that I didn't get any training on treatment plans then when I was in grad school. So I think this is a really important topic because we don't get a lot of training in it, and it's more on the job training, and different agencies may or may not be very good at their onboarding and training process. So sometimes I think treatment plan writing is not something that's prioritized in the onboarding process. So Brianna says, in Kentucky, internship student. Oh, that's awesome. Working with children and adolescents, writing treatment plans, but we'd love to get to know them better. That's awesome. Feel free to ask questions. So what are some of the myths? And think about it this way. Your belief system is going to heavily influence your attitude and your behavior towards treatment plans. So treatment planning and treatment plans are two very different things. They are connected. First step is treatment planning, and then the second step is taking that treatment planning process and creating the actual treatment plans. So one of the myths that I often hear is that play play therapy is too intuitive. It's process oriented. You don't really need to write treatment plans. It's intuitive. You just go with the flow with play therapy. And I would say in some of the more process-oriented adult theoretical models, there's this same belief system. I think there's in the expressive arts field as well. Play therapy is one type of expressive arts modality. I think this is one that I've heard a lot. And the truth is, so the myth is that it's too intuitive and you can't really write treatment plans because you can't plan out ahead and you can't break it down into steps. And the truth is, if you're using a theoretical model, then your theoretical model is going to have stages of treatment, and certain tasks need to be accomplished in each stage of treatment. And there are certain things that you're going to be working on in each of those stages of treatment, which means you can, in a general sense, break things down into what needs to be accomplished in each phase. And then the other thing is you want to make sure you have an understanding of various child and adolescent mental health disorders and problems that children and adolescents face, because then you're going to use that in your case conceptualization to better understand what the problem is. And so case conceptualization is a topic that I've talked about in previous live stream episodes. So and I talked about that over several weeks. If you haven't watched any of those videos, I would highly recommend that you watch those, because the case conceptualization is really the first step to treatment planning, which then will result in your treatment plan. And it really is a process. There's a whole process that you want to make sure you go through prior to even getting to the actual point where you're writing down problem area, goals, objectives, and interventions. You want to make sure you're doing those other steps before you get to this point. And so how does that relate to process-oriented or more intuitive aspects of play therapy, or your mental health, or your adult model that you're using for the theoretical model that you're using? It matters because you're going to be conceptualizing what exactly is the problem and why is it happening. That's your case conceptualization. You're going to do that through the lens of your theoretical model. So let's say you're using Gestalt play therapy, which is more process-oriented, or child-centered play therapy, where the child leads and you as the therapist do not lead. How do you write treatment plans for these types of modalities? The reality is, even these models have stages of change in the treatment process, and certain things occur in each of those stages. So you can break it down that way. And additionally, you're also going to do that case conceptualization where you're identifying what is the problem and why is it happening. You're looking at that through your theoretical lens. So if you're working with a 6-year-old and you're using child-centered play therapy, and you're looking at identifying what the problem is and why it's happening based on child-centered play therapy theoretical model. And so from each stage of the treatment process, you can identify steps that need to occur based on the problem that's happening. You're breaking down the steps into goals and objectives is really about knowing what your client needs to change, what needs to change for your client. And then you can use your theoretical model to kind of map that out. So I would say, even with these more process-oriented or intuitive models, even child-centered play therapy, where the child leads the way and you don't direct the process, you still can break that down. And you can break it down in ways that meet agency and insurance standards. I have been doing it for the last 20 years. And so it's still possible. So that's myth number one. Myth number two is this one I hear a lot. I would say I probably hear this one. I would say it's probably the number one myth. I'm going to call it a myth. Myth that I hear people saying. And I totally understand it. I totally get it. I hate paperwork as much as the next therapist. It is not my favorite thing to do. And I try really hard not to get behind on my documentation, because catching up on documentation is my version of hell. It is painful. I don't enjoy doing it. That being said, treatment plans, one form of documentation, the myth is that they're not necessary. They're just a waste of time. I'm not going to use them anyway. It's just to please the paperwork gods. It's just to please my agency. So think about it. If that's your mindset, what is your approach going to be to using treatment plans? What is your mindset going to be in seeing the usefulness of them? So this to me is a really huge myth, that if you can do kind of a belief system change, it will definitely change the way in which you approach treatment plans, the way in which you use treatment plans, the way in which you write treatment plans, and the way that you use them to help your clients engage in the change process and create hope for them. So here's how I look at treatment plans. So this, to me, debunking the myth that they're not necessary and they're a waste of time. I can't tell you how many times I've heard play therapists say that. And then I've been in instances where I've had to review charts or talk to others in my similar role, only to find that they're actually not getting done. And to me, that's a shame, because they can be a really useful tool to help your client engage in the change process. And so the mindset shift can be a way to help you see treatment plans as meaningful and help to engage your clients. And so what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is when you're doing your case conceptualization with your client, you've gathered all of the information with your assessment. Hopefully you are doing this assessment because it is a really important step. So they're telling you what's going on. They're coming to you because you're the expert. They don't know how to do this. They want help for their child. How many of you have had clients that or parents that have brought their 5-year-old to you who is having meltdowns all day long, and they're terrified that their child is going to be the next serial killer? Not really. But they're worried their child is going to be unsuccessful. They're going to get in trouble. They're going to have this horrible, terrible life. They're worried that they're the worst parent, that they've ruined their child forever. These are all the things that they're worried about when they're bringing their child to you. So how does that relate to treatment plans? When you're doing the case conceptualization process, you are figuring out at that very first appointment. And again, it's assessment throughout the treatment process, which is why you want to review your treatment plans. So you're gathering that initial information, you're formulating your case conceptualization, and then your ongoing assessment from there, and you adjust as needed. But initially, you're still going through that case conceptualization process to identify what is the problem and why it's happening. That's going to influence your treatment planning. So you have parents sitting in front of you, and they may or may not have their child in there, depending on how you do things or how your agency operates. And now they've told you everything that's going on with their child, and their worst fear is their child is going to have a horrible life. The child that they love, even though that child is frustrating and they don't know what to do. When you go through and you ask the questions for the treatment planning process, what would you like to be better by having your child come? And what will that look like? To me, these are two key questions I ask when I am doing that treatment planning portion. And here's what that does. That now parent and maybe child, depending on the child, will tell you, here's what I want to be better. Here's what that's going to look like. They're now telling you what they want to be better. They're not sure it can happen. They're afraid it can't happen. So when you say things like, okay, so the goal you want is your child is going to be able to regulate their emotions. And they look at you like, yeah, but in their mind, they're like, yeah, but I don't think that's going to happen. Well, you're beginning to plant the seed of, oh, okay, we can do this. We can fix this, so to speak. And then you're asking, getting like, how will you know what that's going to be better? So they'll start telling you how they're going to know when that's better. These, by the way, can become your objectives, but this is also where you start to adjust expectations as needed. So here's an example of that. Most parents will say, I want my child to be happy. And that's their goal. That's the outcome they want. I want my child to be happy. It's an elusive goal. It's an unattainable goal. Nobody can be happy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I begin to make that shift of I'll do that kind of expectation adjustment of happiness is really an elusive goal. I'll say it much better than that, but you guys know what I mean. Really, what will be most beneficial to your child is resiliency. Resiliency is what's going to help them navigate the ups and downs of life and deal with difficulties. Now, we want to do that within a context. As parents, we want to make sure we are keeping our child safe. And at the same time, we need to understand we cannot protect them from every little up and down that happens in their life. It's not even helpful for them for us to do that because eventually they'll become adults and they need to learn how to do this. So what we really want to do is teach them resiliency. And in this case, resiliency will look like X, Y, and Z. So depending on what the problem is and why it's happening, and then you'll kind of give some examples of what that might look like for this particular child in this particular instance. So with emotion regulation, depending on the lens that you're looking at, if we're still using the emotion regulation example, then you're going to kind of break that down in your theoretical model, what needs to happen for that occur. And this now becomes your goal and part of your objectives if you do that. The other thing it's doing is setting expectations, giving hope for the parent and the child. Oh, we can do this. I've got this. We've got this together. Because the other thing you want to make sure you do, and if you have listened to any of my live stream episodes in the past, if you have attended any of my live webinars or in-person trainings or taken any of my courses, you will hear me say this 90 bazillion times. Parents need to be an active participant in the child's treatment. So how you do that is going to depend on your theoretical model as well as how you're conceptualizing the treatment planning process, like how often they're going to be involved, how are they going to be involved, those kinds of things. Because for treatment plans, you need to put at least an objective in there for what parents are going to be working on. Make sure you put that in there because it sets expectation and they're now understanding their part of the change process and they need to invest. So you're setting expectation, you're identifying who's going to be doing what and what are we going to be working on to accomplish. So now you're beginning to paint a picture in their head of what this treatment process is going to look like. It's not, this is especially important if you have clients who this is their first time coming to counseling. They don't know what this involves. So, as the expert, it's your role to help them understand that. And the treatment planning process that results in a treatment plan can help you to do that. So that's myth number 2. They aren't necessary. Myth number 3 is play therapy treatment plans are too complicated. They take too long. They don't make any sense. Like, I get why they need to be done. I don't have a problem with getting them done, but they just take too much time. They're too complicated. They're overwhelming. They're confusing. And my mind goes into total meltdown whenever I have to sit down and do these darn treatment plans. So the truth is, if you have gone through your case conceptualization process, and this is something, if you're interested, I'm going to talk about some of my courses and Play Therapy Academy. I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. If you're interested in learning more about case conceptualization, I do have a course. It's a self-paced course. It walks you through step by step by step the process for doing that case conceptualization that answers the questions of what exactly is going on with these behaviors that are bringing this child into treatment with me, and why is it happening? What's perpetuating this? Because those two questions have to be, and the other part of that is, what role does culture, if culture is a factor, what role does culture play in this problem? And or what are some of the resiliency factors of culture for this client? So if you have not done any work in developing your case conceptualization skills, but you want to write good treatment plans, my suggestion is make sure you learn about case conceptualization. I would highly recommend taking the course. It's self-paced. It's pre-recorded modules. There's a workbook. There are activities in there that are going to help you get your kind of process trained in your brain. Here's the step-by-step process to go through this. I'm also going to talk about at the end about, I do have a treatment planning course that's now available. I'll talk a little bit more about that one, which kind of walks you through step by step using case examples, theoretical models, and all of that. That one's now available too. So I'll talk to you about that. Also, if you're interested, I do have Play Therapy Academy. That's my online consultation program. We talk about case conceptualization in there all the time, because I think it's an important part of the process. And we staff cases. It's really about how do you take what's you learned in trainings, although I'm kind of a teacher at heart, so I do a lot of teaching in the consultation meetings that we do. All of these courses for getting grounded in play therapy excellence are going to be in Play Therapy Academy. So if you're interested in play therapy consultation, AKA supervision, I do have a few more openings left in Play Therapy Academy. If you don't need supervision or a consultation and you just need the courses, these are available like kind of like a la carte, like on a case by case. You can just go in there and buy a course if that's what you need. So Facebook group user said, should play therapy treatment plans be very detailed? That's a great question. So it depends on what part. I would say the objectives. You want to be specific because the objectives are the action steps to accomplish the overall goal. So I don't know if you're familiar with the SMART format. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic or relevant, and time oriented. If you kind of, and I talk about this in my play therapy treatment planning course. One of the modules is about using the SMART format for your treatment plans. And then we use that with different, what would that look like with different play therapy theory models. So you do want to be detailed. And if you use a SMART model, that will help you be detailed and the objectives are going to be more detailed than the goal because the objectives are the action steps to accomplish the overall goal. Barbara says, great info. Thank you. You're welcome. Thanks for coming, attending for today. So the last myth is play therapy treatment plans are too complicated. And they can feel overwhelming, especially if you're new to writing treatment plans. What I would say is once you understand the framework that you go through, that step-by-step process, they become less complicated and they become kind of pretty easy after that. So the thing is, you really have to do your case conceptualization process first, because that will then influence your treatment planning. Your treatment planning process is where you're conceptualizing what strategies or interventions or play therapy model you're going to use if you're more prescriptive in nature in your approach to play therapy. If you're using specific like Adlerian play therapy, you're going to know some of the interventions Adlerian play therapy would use, and you'll start kind of thinking, oh, these will work probably, and it will take this approach. Each play therapy model is going to have different types of interventions, so to speak. I use that very loosely with child-centered play therapy, but there are different skills that need to occur in that specific model. And this is where developing your competency in play therapy is really, really important. And developing your competency with your specific model is really important. And it does come into play with your treatment planning process, where you kind of get a sense of, okay, here's what I need to do. Here's what needs to happen. Here's who needs to be involved in the process. Here's how often we're going to meet, those kinds of things. Then you take that, and then that will influence your actual treatment plan. So you've kind of spelled it out in the previous two steps, and then the end result of the whole process is your treatment plan. So treatment planning is a prerequisite to actually sitting down and writing that treatment plan. And if you get those steps down, then treatment plans actually become much less complicated. And the thing is, the other way in which you use them that's useful is you're going to use these treatment plans. You're going to come up with, this is part of your like planning formulation. How often are we going to review? You definitely want to make sure you're reviewing these treatment plans, because like I would say every 90 days is probably the standard. Some people it's every 6 months. Some people do it once a year. I think waiting once a year is too long. I think anywhere between 90 days and 6 months is probably that ideal place, because you're going to be coming back to these treatment plans and you're going to be reviewing them to see how are we doing with these, which brings your client back to, oh, that's right, we're working on these things, and kind of reorienting to make sure you're on track. The other thing is it's your time to make sure that treatment plans are still what needs to happen, because once you get started, things change, you understand things more. So you might need to adjust or revise your treatment plan a little bit, but you're doing this together. You're collaborating with your parent and the child, depending on the age of the child, and that gets more investment in the change process. Somewhere along the line, you're probably going to hit some obstacles. You can address those throughout the treatment process. You can use treatment plans as part of your way of addressing some of those in there. So treatment plans in that way are very useful. And once you get the hang of the steps, then it becomes much easier and much less complicated after that, because you're identifying what the problem is, you're identifying what goal. So the goal is the outcome. What do they hope to accomplish? What will be better by coming? And then the objectives are the action steps that break that down. And so and then you have the interventions, and there are different ways people do interventions. There's a couple different formats for that. I go over that in the treatment planning course. And so once you get the framework down and you get the process in place, it becomes much easier and much less complicated. And then you can also be using the treatment plans to review periodically to make sure you're on track, make sure there's still investment, remind what we're focusing on, change if needed. So that is it for today. Let me just do a quick recap. First and foremost, first myth is you can't really write treatment plans for play therapy because it's intuitive, it's process oriented. The reality is you can, because even every play therapy model, every adult theoretical model, they're still going to have stages of change in the treatment process. And there's still going to be things that have to be accomplished in each stage of change. So you can use that information to write your treatment plan. The second thing is, the second myth is treatment plans aren't necessary. They're a waste of time. They don't really matter. And the reality is they can really be an effective way to give your client hope that change is possible. They help your client set expectations for what the change process is going to look like, which will help engage more in the change process. With setting expectations, the other thing is, if you kind of get a sense of if there are going to be any obstacles that have to be overcome based on parent and child's response to this treatment planning phase. And you can start addressing those sooner rather than later. And using the treatment plans as part of a review process, a periodic review, really helps you to make sure you're staying on track so that you get really good outcomes. This is true also with child-centered play therapy, which is child-led. You're meeting with parents to understand what's going on. You're setting expectations. You're doing that coaching process. So even in much more heavily process oriented, you can still write treatment plans and use them to facilitate the change process and get that outcome that parents want and kids want. And then the third thing is third myth is treatment plans are too complicated, they're overwhelming, and they don't make any sense. And the reality is, once you get the framework in place, once you get the systematic process in place and kind of recognize what happens in each step of the process, they do become much less complicated, much easier to write, and they will take much less time because you'll have got that process down pat. So that is it for today. If you have any questions about the courses, please feel free to send me an email. If you're interested in any of the courses that I've mentioned, you can pop over to my website. It's rhplaytherapytraining.com. I'm going to put a link in the comments to the courses page. You can take a look at the case conceptualization course, the treatment planning course. I also have a course in there for getting grounded in play therapy foundations. That one's in there as well. I have some other courses. I have some other live webinars coming up if you're interested in some of those live webinars. Play Therapy Academy, I do have some openings in Play Therapy Academy. This is more of a hands-on play therapy consultation group program. We do staff cases, talk about what's going on, identifying what needs to happen, facilitating that change process. So if you're interested in that, you can pop over to my website, rhplaytherapytraining.com. Go over to the supervision page and you can read more about Play Therapy Academy and schedule a free 30-minute consultation with me to see how it can be useful for you. That I like doing this meeting just to make sure it's something that would be effective for you. Again, if you're interested in the treatment planning course, it'll be on my website on the courses page, and I will put a link below. If you found this information helpful, please like and share it across your social media platforms. If you pop over to my YouTube channel, Kathy Spooner, Renewing Hearts Training, click on the live tab. You can see all of the replays there. Please feel free to share those across your social media platforms. And if you find it on YouTube channel, click that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you'll be notified when I have new videos or I'm going live. All righty, I'll see you next time. Bye.